Hey, this is Kahja Elliott, Bronx born and raised, ATL made, Bay Area becoming, and this is the As Told By podcast. We are back this week with a new episode of the As Told By podcast, recording here today from Oakland. And y'all know that I collect cookbooks and, I'm a fan of getting in the kitchen and getting your hands in it. And so today, what better conversation to have than with Kiano Moju, Oakland native, who is a cookbook author. Well, she's more than a cookbook author, but most recently, she has authored a beautiful new cookbook called AfriCali that celebrates the history of her African heritage and of her California upbringing. The book is out and living in the world. And so, Kiano, welcome to the As Told By podcast.
Hi, in Oakland, as it should be.
Yes. Listen, you are here kicking off. So by the time this airs, it will already be in full swing, but you are here kicking off this evening, in fact, your book tour to celebrate the release.
Yeah, I have my very first book talk, which is so exciting. I feel like book talks are something that we have all seen through rom-coms. You know, they're quiet, they're in like cute little bookstore. Maybe all of my imagery is from England. What is that one? That film with Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts?
He has so many.
She's like
of
a famous
the rom-coms.
actor, and he like has a travel bookstore.
I'm lost for the name, but
Notting Hill.
Notting Hill. Okay.
Notting Hill.
That was
just get a tweed jacket. No. I'm showing up in leopard print.
Oh man. Well, look, that is so exciting. How are you feeling about tonight kicking it off?
I'm excited. I think, something like a cookbook, it isn't just something that people are going to read. They're going to hopefully read what's before the recipes, but then cook from it and have photos and memories and food stories coming from it. And so this is the first event. The book's only been out for a week. I'm hoping as the tour moves along, we keep meeting people who've been cooking from the book and they have stories to share. But it's really just one big celebration of it coming out.
All right, then we're about to get into celebrating. Okay, so let's get started. So your African heritage is split between two countries. So your mom is from Kenya, your dad is from Nigeria. In my mind, you are like the walking diaspora, right? Because those are two countries that, are at the top of people's list when they think about countries in Africa. So what has been, kind of some of the similarities and some of the differences between those two cultures?
To be honest, I think the differences might be more than the similarities, especially within my family. Because my mother's family, who's from Kenya, our tribe is Maasai. So we're ranchers, raising cows, goat, sheep, chickens. And my dad's family is from the Nigerian Delta, so off the water. So a lot of seafood. So even that part, two worlds apart. But Kenyan food, we don't have any Kenyan restaurants. I keep checking in the Bay Area, but it does use a lot of ingredients that are now considered global ingredients. A lot of fresh produce, where Nigerian food does have a little bit more regionality to the ingredients. There's certain stuff that typically, if you want to make the full suite of Nigerian food, you got to find the Nigerian grocery. Where with my Kenyan cuisine, I can go pop to any grocery store and find what I need. It's kind of nice.
Okay. That is nice. I got my book last week and I already started leafing through it to see what am I going to make first. I've been moving around this last week, so I haven't done much cooking, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to make something out of this book. And the first thing I looked at is what are the spice profiles I need? And like, what do I have already where I can make this up? Which I loved that you had like ingredients for spice mixes versus saying, go out and find this spice.
Yeah. So there's two camps. Certain spice mixes that are mentioned in the book, like berbere from Ethiopia, I'm going to tell you to buy it. Because when you look at that ingredient list, It's long, and it might not be things that you're going to use in your other cooking. We've all been there. We've shopped for a recipe and bought a lot of stuff that has sat in the back of our cupboard too long. And so I wanted to avoid that. So that one, I'm like, you can order it anywhere now. They have a lot of big grocery stores, but click online, it'll be in your house in a day or two.
Yep.
So buy that one. But other things like it's a Nigerian spice blend called yaji. And it's a spice rub for really grilling for a dish called suya. That uses things that are really frequent. You know, it's garlic powder, onion powder, peanuts. So stuff that we have, and it's very common and I think can get into the rest of your home cooking. So I give you a recipe for that. So you have a little bit of mix. I'm like, buy this. And then we're going to make this one.
All right. I'm looking over here at my spice grinder on my counter. So I'll be making some things up because Lord knows I don't need another damn spice. I got plenty. So, Kiano, you talked about in the book being young and having the experience of getting up on Saturday morning and watching, different than cartoons like a lot of us were doing, but getting up to watch the rundown of PBS cooking shows and then going into the kitchen to cook. So how much of your love and interest at that time was around the food itself versus the alchemy of being able to turn something into something else?
I think it was probably is a couple things, but the thing I was drawn to with those programs was just that receiving information. I love the educational part about cooking. It's something so cool where there's not a lot of spaces where we can be entertained but also feel smarter and also apply that learning in ways that doesn't feel like homework. And cooking was like that to me. So I could watch Lydia on her Italian cooking show on PBS, and she'd be like, you need to do this and your tomatoes need to be like this. I'm like, all right. And I can go back in the kitchen and regurgitate it, learn it, start understanding. And so I think it was really putting that two and two together that I could watch and then immediately apply. And then start figuring things out of like, oh, this is why I do this. The chemistry part comes down to baking, just because that transformation is really, really cool. But I think my love for cooking has always been in the teaching education part. This is why you don't see me with a restaurant. I think it's so fun learning and sharing food and like especially how to make it, and that was the part I was drawn to.
Yeah. I people who've been listening this season, you've heard me mention it a few times, but just a PBS girly for real. Like I love, like you said, the education of it. I've been watching a lot of Life of Loy recently. She's a woman. She has a restaurant in New York, Mediterranean style cooking. So I always like find pockets of people, and I got to meet. This summer at James Beard, I got to meet Rick Bayless, and I was trying not to be a fangirl, but I was a fangirl because I was watched for years and felt like I had learned so much about those regions in Mexico. So yeah, shout out to PBS and teaching folks about food.
Seriously, their cooking shows were it.
Yeah, all of it. You come from an African background. And you grew up in California. And I know that, just thinking back to, 90s and early 2000s, a lot of times urban Black environments in the U.S. were kind of slow to embrace African culture. And I remember back in season 2, before the podcast was exclusively like about food and culinary, and I talked to Igwehi James, who's a designer here in Oakland. She's of Nigerian descent. She designs clothing. And we talked about how the styles and the hair and the culture that's so celebrated now, like that was not always the case, right? How good does it feel to now see how celebrated African culture is, particularly with many Black people who grew up in America who have yet to even maybe visit the continent?
Yeah, it's not even just, yes, if your parents aren't from the continent, you might have not grown up eating those foods, but it's also those of us who are from the diaspora haven't had much chance to try each other's food. So I think we're all collectively in this new chapter where I mean, dining out and what we cook at home is a big part of our lives, a big part of our money. And I think it's awesome that we now have these opportunities to, take all our friends to brunch into a restaurant that feels, maybe it's not necessarily food we grew up in, but we also feel like I can slide into this real quick and just like really feel a sense and like of excitement and exploring and sharing and really just using that social space to be in community with your friends and family. I think that it's still very slowly happening, especially for us here in California. Ethiopian restaurants have been really good at not just showing up in a singularity, but in communities. We have on Telegraph here in Oakland, loads of Ethiopian restaurants. In LA, we have Little Ethiopia. And so it's very common to see people, Black Americans, as well as Caribbean folks from Africa, other countries, going in and bringing their international friends to enjoy those foods. But, there are so many other countries that we don't have restaurants for, or maybe not where we live. And that's where home cooking comes in. And so I think it's great that we have cookbooks and YouTube channels and blogs and TikTokers that are giving people opportunity to engage with those cultures from their home.
Coming from the East Coast, I grew up in New York, and you trip and fall into diasporic restaurants, Haitian, Jamaican,
So lucky.
all over the place, every kind of African, it's there, right? So we know that, the existence of African food and ingredients and cooking styles in mainstream cookbook and restaurant space is somewhat of a recent happening, right? So almost all of your exposure likely came from within your family and extended community. Why did you feel it was important to highlight this specific culinary style in proximity to California style? And are they more closely related than we might think?
So I don't really have an eloquent answer for this. I make this food because it's really delicious. And it tastes really good. And my career, I've worked in food media for a lot of companies that, I've written recipes for Tasty, where I started my career, but I've contributed to Serious Eats, Food Network. And the thing I've found in my work is that so many people just haven't had food, especially from Kenya, but even from Nigeria or from places that other African countries that I've eaten and enjoyed a lot, like Senegal, Ghana. And as someone who loves food, I'm like, you are so missing out on this delicious food. So for this book, my goal was to curate those flavor combinations, recipes that introduce people to these flavors, but without that barrier of sourcing ingredients. Because as ambitious as we all are with how we want to paint our lives, the reality is we're busy. We have a routine. We shop where we shop, and sometimes we can buy one or two things online. So I really wanted to feel seamless and less foreign. Not even in thought of like, oh, this food is just like ours, but less foreign, where it doesn't have to seem like an idea far, far away. And you actually can make Kenyan food using ingredients that you are already very familiar with and probably already have in your fridge, just haven't put them together in that way.
Okay. I've had that experience where you have a cookbook, you go to make something out of it. It's one of these ones that we just were talking about that's here on my shelf. It's from a popular restaurant here in the Bay, but it's very culturally specific. And you open it, and then I would close and it'd be like, never mind, because it just seemed like it was a tall order. You had to have the ingredients, there was just a lot of specificity to it. So, that California style that really embraces produce and, fresh foods and, flavor combinations, but not a lot of flavors, and just focusing maybe on a few things that really drive the profile of a dish, meeting those very specific nuances of different styles of African cooking. So like you said, suya spice or Berbere spice, even harissa I saw in the book as well. So
But it's not just spice blends. Like I don't think my grandma has anything in her cupboard but salt, and her food is amazing because it's so driven by high quality, fresh produce, fresh meat. And so, really, I think a lot of folks think international food means foreign ingredients, but it really is just like, how do people assemble dishes? What are the techniques people use to make a dish? It doesn't always necessarily mean new ingredients, because a lot of us are eating and cooking with the same things: onions, garlic, tomatoes, everywhere.
very true. Jollof, jambalaya, red rice,
Paella. It's all the same core base ingredients. It's just technique difference, it's quantity difference, ratios, maybe one other thing.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of cuisine, and what I aim to do with this book, is to show folks that international doesn't necessarily mean foreign when you read that ingredient list.
Okay. I'm going to get back in my cookbook and not be intimidated and go back and try to give it another try. To your point, you mentioned about like good, high quality, fresh ingredients. We know that unfortunately there is still a divide in access where fresh food isn't as readily available as we probably know it to be in California. We are super spoiled here. In the spirit of meeting people where they are, how can people who don't have access to a lot of these things approach imparting some of these flavors and techniques into their cooking when their availability or access is challenged?
Yeah. To start, I truly believe, and this is someone who just wrote a cookbook, that recipes should be amended to your situation. Your situation's your dietary restriction. Your situation is what is available to you, whether it's through cost, whether it's through actual physical access. Can I get this thing? I don't really believe in the rigidity of recipes. I change things all the time. But through those changes, you also make it very personal, which I think home cooking should be up and foremost. But I also think that things are changing in a way where groceries aren't always in that same traditional route. There's a lot of folks who will send things to you now. And so I think the cool thing about new recipes and new dishes is that it maybe can challenge a little bit of how you thought you're sourcing. You might discover a new service, a new store, a new shop that your routine otherwise wouldn't have nudged you towards, and help you discover something new that you might like.
You're right. I had that experience. This was some years ago when I gave Blue Apron a try. Because I do like to cook, but I appreciated the convenience that they gave me just enough of everything to make a meal. So like you said, you buy something, you use a little bit, and then it's sitting around for months. So it was a good way to try things that you may not innately put together. And you don't really have a lot of waste because it's just enough for you to do it. But you're like, okay, that's a meal I would have not thought up or put together. So I like that those services put things on your radar. And then if you like it, then you're like, okay, well, I can flip it with this. Instead of kale, I'll use, Swiss chard or whatever.
All the time. Like for my skuma wiki, which is like sauteed collard greens in California are not available year round. And so when I can't find it, I go for the next best dark leafy green, which for me is kale, because it doesn't have that bitterness that chard does. But you pivot, you switch it up, and that's how new favorites are made.
Yes. Well, I'm sure you are more than familiar with pivoting through food, because I understand that you are one of only a few Black culinary producers in the industry, or had time working as one. Is that right?
I don't know how many culinary. So before I went off to start my own company, my role was just like as a video producer, period. So we work with culinary producers, and sometimes I'll work on as a culinary producer on a project just because it's fun and you don't have to deal with the camera team, even though they're fantastic. It's just you get to like kind of zone in on one role. When I started at Tasty, there weren't any other Black producers. And for us, producer means many things in every industry, whether in music or video and digital media. But essentially that meant we were in charge of figuring out what dishes we were going to film for videos. And at the time, creating the recipes for those, shooting those videos, and then with our other team hosting some of those recipe videos as well. So I was the first person in my role to do that, which I didn't know until I started. Because I was still in grad school, so I interviewed remotely. But it really opened my eyes to the greater industry because there are so many companies publishing recipes and cooking videos and cooking shows. And we all kind of know, like, okay, there's not as many Black voices in there. And then once we start looking at the different types of Black cultures that exist, then the numbers really, you're like, okay, are there any of us, that are cooking our regional foods or even our country foods? And so it's very interesting seeing how literally as a country and as an industry, there's still not many people in there, but folks are slowly,
making their way
in. But that's why I think social media is really cool.
Yeah.
Because people make their own platforms, and I think our communities are really good at finding those platforms and celebrating those platforms. It's just those companies have national eyeballs that don't just talk within the community, but talk to our country and also the world.
Yeah.
And it's really good visibility, and people just seeing and appreciating, and then later normalizing these cultures.
Okay. Yeah, we, a couple episodes back, I interviewed Courtney Futch.
Oh, I love Courtney. We went to college together.
Yeah, oh, okay. Yes, I got to spend some time with her in Atlanta and talk to her and learn. I realized that I had just a small, idea of what a culinary producer is and does. And she gave us all such like a wealth of information about what all that comes with. So I can see where that kind of work would be incredibly important in the development of something like a cookbook and all of the logistics that are a part of that. How much of that work that you did? And first of all, I used to love those tasty videos. It was like the best things because they were fun, it was quick and the ingredients were things you already had. I used to love those. But how much of that kind of work is involved in your ability to develop actual recipes versus just your inherited cultural know-how?
There's a couple things with making the book because the recipes are the first thing that happen before we think about photography, design, what plates things are going on. The recipes are first, and that list of recipes was curated before I even had a publisher to publish my book. Getting a book published is a very multi-step process. And so for my first book, and AfriCali is just really personal, I went for those foods and ingredients that I was already cooking a lot. So this wasn't really a research book. This is like you're entering Kiano's kitchen book. And so these are ingredients, spice combinations, dishes. Maybe I like switch some stuff up that I've been honing and developing in my own home for years. But because I contribute to a lot of these other media companies, they just really didn't have a place and outlet where I've been able to share this style of cuisine. And so this book is really the first place I have to really put this food forth, show people that you can integrate these African flavors into whatever you're cooking. Like I just made earlier today the passion fruit and lime pie because the key lime pie just felt a little one note for me. And I was making it for a friend's birthday. And I was like, let's just see what happens if we add in this fruit, which is massively popular in Kenya. And so that's how the flavors in AfriCali came to be. This is a reflection of my cooking style, of my kitchen, of my heritage and food and travel experience coming together.
Got it. Okay. All the little things that you pull from to make that go into making a project like this come to life. Yeah. Well, it's getting lots of good buzz, lots of good acclaim. I saw it's an Amazon bestseller. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'm just so excited to see photos of plates of food. That's what got me into this. I had a food blog in college. Don't know who read it, how many, but I got this message one day for some man in Australia on my recipe and said, made this for my wife for our anniversary. Big hit, thank you. And that was like, yo, how can I be here? At the time I was in upstate New York in school, and someone literally on the other edge of the earth were able to share this food together.
Yeah.
And so that is the part I'm truly, truly most excited for this book, is to start seeing those stories. I saw someone make jollof rice for the very first time.
Yes, Sweet Savant. We saw her. Yeah, she's out of Atlanta. She did. That rice looked amazing.
Because like jollof, if you've heard any dish coming from West Africa, it's probably the one you heard of. And you hear people fighting about it, who got the best one. I just gave you really simple, straightforward. It's almost like this is your foundation, and then honestly, do what you want to it after. I don't care.
Do the remix.
Do the remix, but it's that is truly what I'm the most excited for.
Yeah. Look, I got to get my plates together.
Yeah.
Food Network is describing AfriCali as a cookbook that will change the way you cook. And I know a lot of times, this kind of cooking can denote for some people like long sessions of braising and marinating and those cooking methodologies that maybe take a little bit more time. Does AfriCali introduce ways for people to create some of those same flavor profiles using processes that require less time? Or is this a guide to, a cooking style where folks should expect to invest a little bit of time in making these dishes? Or is it a little bit of both?
Oh yeah, I like to say it's for everyday cooking, which means every day looks different. There are quick, almost like a stir fry. We call them wet fry in Kenya, where it's like this goes in the pan, crank that heat, and just saute your life away. And then there are things like the short ribs braised in stew. That it's like, okay, I'm having a dinner party. I want to host a couple people over. And I think people get shy away from long cook times, but long cook times are kind of your best friend when you're hosting, because you just stick it in the oven and then you actually can like tidy your house and get yourself ready. Because we've all been there when like guests are like about to be there and you're like, oh, I'm still covered in everything. I haven't gotten ready. And so it really has recipes for those different chapters of life. So there's stuff for after work, midweek cooking. There's stuff for brunch. There's stuff for treat yourself meals. I think the rosemary suya lamb chops are a good treat yourself, because who's buying lamb chops for more than 2 people?
It is a little on the
So
high
treat
side.
yourself meal, but also stuff to share that you can make like a big batch and a big pot of something. Invite some people to come over and have a good time.
Yeah. There's, you run the gamut, like you said, fancier, right? Little high end. And then those things that are for, a night with Netflix, right? Where you can just kind of get down in a bowl of something and it feels very homey. So I like that you can go, between the two. I think the one that I'm going to try first, and I can't remember the name exactly, but it was like a spiced fried mushroom.
Oh, the peri-peri mushrooms.
Yes. That is first up on my list. So I'm going to have to hit one of these farmers markets and get my mushrooms and get my spice mixed up and get into it. I cannot wait.
Those are fun. I still have been waiting to do it because I have it as like a snack. I just want to put it on a sandwich. It's like a swap out for a chicken sandwich.
Yes. I've had that at a restaurant, like those meaty fried mushrooms as an alternative for me. Oh, look, you just gave me an idea. I might have to make a whole sandwich out of it. Kiano, talk about the actual process of writing a cookbook. From the outside, we just see like the beautiful finished product. But I'm learning and talking to people that a cookbook is a thing that takes like a few years to
Oh
come to
yeah.
life.
How far back do we want to start?
How long did it take?
I will say this because a lot of people are still interested in like how books come to be.
Yeah.
And to, of course, you can always do independent publishing, but if you want to work with a publisher, the industry flow, and it might be a requirement, is to first get a book agent. And to do that, you have to write a book proposal. So start with a proposal, putting down into this document what I think AfriCali will be, what recipes will be in it, showing what recipes will be in it, and then finding an agent. And that process between working on the proposal and meeting someone who was really gonna go to bat to get this book published was 3-year process.
Oh, wow.
Alone.
Okay.
And by the time I got the book deal with my publisher Simon and Schuster, that was in 2021, and here we are 24. So basically 3 years. So I don't simple addition, but I don't want to do it because it might hurt. It might hurt too much.
That's about 6 to 7 years.
Yeah, it's doing books are they're slow work, especially for someone like me who I did my master's in publishing, so I thought I knew what to expect. They don't teach you enough at all. But besides that, my work has been in video and digital media, social, tight deadlines on editorial. And so having something that you do over a span of years, first writing the recipes, and then once recipes are tested and they feel good about them, we go into photography. We did an 8-day photo shoot for all the recipes. But also while I was writing the book, I was traveling, visiting family in Kenya, visiting friends in Senegal, going to a wedding in Ghana. And so you'll see the travel photography in between the book, and really just to help people understand where the inspiration of where a lot of this food came from. Because food isn't just what's on the plate, it's the lifestyle. So you'll see the markets from Kenya, but also markets in Dakar, Senegal.
Yeah.
So those were really fun.
Yeah, and those photos are so beautiful. There was one where you're like on the boat, and I'm just like, this is nice.
That was in Mombasa, Kenya.
Okay.
People who have Kenya on their bucket list want to go for the safari. But what maybe a lot of people don't know is that Kenya's beaches are some of the most beautiful in the world.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we can't tell too many people. It's our secret. We don't want them to blow up and not become beautiful anymore.
No, just, if you go responsibly. Yes. You have a whole studio where you produce lots of visuals and, things around culinary processes. And this is also where a lot of the cooking and the photography for the book happened. And, it's also a nonprofit. So talk a bit about what Jikoni Recipe Archive is and Jikoni Studio and how they came to be.
Yeah. 2019 is when I started Jikoni Studios as my production company. And we make cooking shows, and we've made cooking shows for a lot of other media companies. So you'll see our work on Food Network, on Fox has a show called like Next Level Chefs. That's the most recent one. We produced like some.
I like that show. Elevator going. Yes.
We didn't do the show, but we did some episodes of like recipes with like one of the contestants, just to like further continue that storyline. And a lot of that, we used to have a physical office, not anymore, but when we had the physical space, we had these beautiful kitchen sets and would buy and curate a lot of like tabletop plates, ceramics, decor, and a lot of that came from Africa. And it was really almost like sneaky, but curious to see if like people from all walks of life, from people from Condé Nast, from Bon Appetit, from Vogue and GQ coming in and pulling and be like, wow, these are so beautiful. I'd be like, oh yeah, that was made in Kenya. And they're like, what? And so we're right now trying to see how we can extend that to more people. Okay. But the thing that we've done out the gate since finding our studios was start a nonprofit, Jikoni Recipe Archive. And Jikoni is Swahili for kitchen. It's a reoccurring theme. That's why the subtitle of the book is Recipes from My Jikoni.
Yes.
From my kitchen. And the goal with, we'll call it JRA, is for short, Jikoni Recipe Archive, is really to document and amplify the cuisines from Africa and African foodways, because oral tradition was great when we did it, and there's just so much knowledge that lives within our elders that hasn't been passed down.
Yes.
And we don't want that stuff to be forgotten. We don't want it to be, oh, that stuff too long, don't got time for it. Okay,
lost.
You might not have time for it today, but you might want it tomorrow. And so our work is focused in that preservation, but also really to collaborate and partner with those chefs and content creators who are amplifying these cuisines, and see if there's something we can collaborate within our projects to help as a collective raise up this food and literally lock it down.
Yeah. I love that you're doing that to try to preserve the heritage, right? And the history of what this is. And, to that point, you thank your mother in the book, to whom the book is dedicated. And I've met your mom, I think, on 2 occasions. She's such a sweet lady. But you dedicated the book, and you stated in there that, she included you along the way in the experience of food. A quote from the book where you state, "By age 10, I was able to taste food from countries across the globe, from small mom and pop restaurants to extravagant seafood towers at your work dinners." What would you tell parents about how to start to globalize their children's palates from a young age?
There's no such thing as kids' food. Kids around the world eat what everyone else is eating. When I spent a lot of my summers in Kenya, and I mean, obviously, if you're like a tiny baby in your intro, but even too, we had a party. There's like a 1-year-old, and they're like, "Here, have some of this Jollof rice." I'm like, "There's chili," and they're like, "She's fine," because they don't baby the palate, and they just feed the kids what everyone else is eating. Is probably the simplest way to go about it. But it's also, my mom bought me a kid's cookbook. Okay. And it was international. I tried to find it, and I think it's out of print. And it took me what I thought was around the globe. Now, looking back at it or thinking back at it, it was just like Europe and maybe a little bit of Asia and America. But it was marketed as a kid's cookbook, a global cookbook. But through that, I just learned my way, because we can't always travel. But I traveled through that book. And now there might not be a world kids cookbook out there, but there are so many YouTube videos, and there's so many just non-children focused cookbooks that parents can engage and like prepare some meals with their kids.
Yeah. Kids, this, I think of one of these videos I see a lot on social media, and a woman has, I think, 3 or 4 little young kids, and they have their cutting boards and their knives, and I'm just like, look at these kids. I love it. We ain't doing chicken fingers today. No shade to a chicken finger.
I love chicken fingers. So one thing I missed when I was in grad school, because I did grad school in the UK. They don't do chicken fingers over there.
Oh, okay. They do, well,
they got the same chickens we do, but they ain't do chicken fingers.
No fingers. Do something else. Well, just to wrap us up, I will ask you one last question. The book introduction includes a picture of a young version of you, and you're standing at the stove cooking, and now years later, this is your career. Has it turned out like the girl in that picture hoped that it would?
Girl in that picture, I think I was 11 years old. I still had the dream that one day I would be on the Food Network hosting my own cooking show. Things have changed. There's still a couple cooking shows on there, but not the same way it did over 20 years ago. But if I were to jump in a time machine and slide this book over to me then, I would have been over the moon, but also would have not been pre-law undergrad, because we did not need to do that.
Long way to go to get to where you needed to end up. But you're here. You're here. And so happy to see what you have been able to accomplish. Tell folks where they can find out more information about you, about the book, and about the book tour.
So I've always wanted to say this. AfriCali is available wherever books are sold.
Hey.
You can find more information on my website. It's just my name, kianomoju.com. I have details about the book as well as links of different stores you can get it from. There's also the full book tour schedule on there. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure we still have a couple updates to throw on there. Uh-oh. So the tour of today is it's living and breathing, and I'm hoping we get to make a couple more fun stops along the way.
All right, watch the schedule. I will make sure that I post all of this with the show notes, but I will be at the book stop tonight at Omnivore Books. I'm going to head into the city later this afternoon, so I'll already be there. So looking forward to that there. And of course, I have my book here. I can't wait until my schedule settles a little bit and I can get in my kitchen and start making things. But thank you so much for coming and talking with me today, and congratulations on the release.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for people to start getting these flavors in their kitchen.
We're excited to eat them and get them in our mouths. If you want to keep up with me in between episodes, you can find me on Instagram at Hey K in the Bay. That has been this week's episode of the As Told By podcast. I will be on location when y'all hear from me next. I'll let you know from where when that episode is released. See you on the next one.